Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From the Mount, a podcast from the campus of Mount Perrin Christian School. I'm your host, Steve Kyle, and joining me in a very unique one-on-one episode. We have maybe only had one other one of these episodes before. So this is just a one-on-one. There's no co-host, but we have in the co-host seat today Dr. David Tilley, longtime head of Mount Perrin Christian School. So depending on when you're listening to this, while we're recording, current interim head of Mount Perrin Christian School. And I'm just going to say an expert on Mount Perrin Christian School. Dave, I know you wouldn't maybe say that,
nice.
but that's really what this episode is about. So, Dave, thank you for being a part of this episode.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad to be here to talk about the place I love.
Yeah, and it's going to be a good one. If you've looked at the description, this one is entitled Move Mountains. And of course, it's really a history. This podcast was started not too very long ago on the campus of Mount Perrin Christian School. And so wherever you listen to this, note that that's kind of where it came from. But this podcast wouldn't even be a thing if Mount Perrin Christian School were not a thing. And so as we look back over for the thousands of people this place has impacted over its years, this episode for the next 20, 25 minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about the origin, the beginnings, the God-moving mountains for this place to be here. And Dave, of anybody, and again, we say that because I don't think anybody has deeper ties, who's more knowledgeable about what's taken place over the almost 50 years of history this place has than you. There's been lots of people come and go, and you've even come and gone.
Thank you.
So Dave, yeah, and so we want to talk about that. But first things, again, for people who might be listening who don't know who Dr. David Tilley is, just let's get a quick snapshot of everything from like, hey, I married to the great Angie. I've got wonderful grandkids. A little bit about you, Dave.
Sure. No, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to do this too. You're married to Angie for almost 48 years. So we're going up to our 48th anniversary with 3 beautiful children and giving us 7 grandchildren. I love to say this, so I'm going to throw this in. I love Mount Perrin, obviously, and I love the fact that all 3 of my children, our 2 daughters and our son, Jessica, Amanda, and Jared, are all involved in Christian education. And all 7 of our grandchildren, from Tennessee to Roswell to Marietta, are all involved in Christian schools. Yeah. So there's a man among all men most richly blessed, right?
Yes,
here.
That's right.
3 children who are participating in this God ministry that I really embrace. And in spite of my encouragement to do something else, they all went into education. And all 7 of my grandkids are enjoying the fruits of this work as well. So it's a blessing to me.
And then your involvement in leadership. So when you consider education as a whole, you've not only been in private Christian school education, you've been in other places. Give us a little quick snippet of your background in education and leadership.
Sure. This is my 53rd year in education and 50 in leadership, 10 years of which were spent in Cobb County schools, right here where Mount Perrin's located, in Cobb as a principal, as a teacher, as a central office administrator. In addition to that, I spent 17 years as vice president of Christian colleges, 2 different Christian colleges, one in New York and one in Tennessee. And then I served as the founding director of the graduate leadership program at Gordon College in Boston after having served at Houghton and Lee. And so I worked in leadership development. That particular program is designed to encourage people to go into Christ-serving K-12 schools. And so that was a blessing. Then I retired after all of that, went into another interim at another Christian school in town, and then was called back this year to be here. This is my 19th year at Mount Perrin, but I'll go back even 50 years ago in a second when we get to that point.
Yeah.
But my degree was in educational leadership. I always thought I was going to be in higher ed permanently, maybe college presidency or something like that for me future. God had another calling for me. But I can tell you that there is nothing more blessed. I've never could be so blessed than the calling I received to be at a school like Mount Perrin. This is home to me. It is my calling. It is my blessing. for over the last 19 years. But that's been over 3 different tenures.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been 19 years consecutively. So I've seen it from various perspectives.
You have. And so needless to say, obviously, when it comes to Christian education, but educational leadership at all, it's pretty clear. I mean, you've seen it all. I mean, and it's no doubt helped shape and form the leader that you are. And not only that, how you even look at what we do in preparing the next when you're at the college level and you know what, and now, of course, having kids, grandkids, all those things come into play. And so let's focus then here about Mount Paran, because again, I've been on staff here at Mount Paran for 7 years. You actually hired me under one of your second stint here. Was when I was hired.
A great move
here.
On my part.
So, well, I don't know, a great move for me certainly, as I look at that. But so I've learned a lot about Mount Paran, but there is no doubt so much. Actually, you and I were talking about this, I think yesterday, in kind of preparation for this. Even a little nugget about it I wasn't even aware of about Mount Paran. So let's just go all the way back to the beginning.
Sure.
Before Mount Paran ever existed, out on the front of our building, 1976, or out on the sign on the road is when Mount Paran was founded. But kind of give me, you were there, were you not, at the kind of the origin of this, or at least early on?
I was there at the very beginning of this in 1976. I was actually a Cobb County administrator, but I had worked on the staff at Mount Paran Church, which is located in Buckhead in Atlanta. So the first mountain that was moved was this one, very clearly. 2 ladies, Judy Thiel and Jean Myrick, remember them well, came to Dr. Paul Walker, who was pastor of Mount Paran Church, well-known church, a mega church in Atlanta, where I had served as a pastor and still was attending. Came to him and said, we need a Christ-centered Christ-centered school in the Buckhead area. There are a lot of nice college prep schools, but none Christ-centered. So he called me and he said, Dave, I don't have any interest in a K-12 Christian school. So you talk to them and see if you can dissuade them, or if there's value to it, then come back and let's talk about it. So I knew that going into this, that he was not necessarily wanting to add that on to the plate of a big church. Met with him, and the rest is history. I went to him, as did the ladies, and convinced him this is a good deal for the church as a ministry. And we started Mount Paran Christian Learning Center. That was the first name of the school. It was a preschool, and we designed it. I became the first board chair. So my involvement was helping to initiate it, look at curricular development, and become the first board chair with the preschool that we developed, understanding that what we had designed to do was to add 1 grade a year. That's pretty natural. Add 1 grade a year on the campus in Buckhead. Small campus.
And that was in 1976.
1976.
Got it.
So in 1976, we started that program. And at that point, there was several commitments. 1, unapologetically Christian. No question about our Christian faith. That has never changed, obviously, in over almost 50 years. Some things have changed. We've grown from 20-some students to over 1,320 students. And interestingly, I think the point that you referenced earlier, initially the idea of being a covenantal school as opposed to a missional or an open enrollment school really didn't dawn on us. We were an open enrollment school. We were trying to serve the people in the Buckhead area. So we were, until really 10 years later, 1986, when we made a commitment to covenantal relationships.
Yeah.
So it was initially an open enrollment and mission school. Started there, and that was the initiation of the school at the church. Typically a preschool. Had no idea that it would ever become what it is today. So there's no thought of that happening.
So this was a Monday through Friday, essentially preschool only.
That's right.
That was it. And you said 20. How many in the first year?
20, 30 students in the first year.
Handful of staff.
3, I think. 3 staff.
A handful. Yeah.
Really didn't need a board chair, but I was there to kind of guide them. Well, obviously, 280 staff members later,
correct,
quite different. But God moved in miraculous ways in those days. I did not join officially until 1984. I became the head. And so it was at that point that we were looking to start a middle school. We had already grown to the 5th grade.
Still on the same campus.
Still on the same campus.
Okay.
Moved locations to the Family Life Center. Wow, that was a big move.
Yeah,
wow, that was huge. I mean, the fact that we were able to do that, I mean, the fact that God allowed us to move into a wonderful new facility, a Family Life Center, Fellowship Hall kind of thing. And we moved to middle school, which was great. We thought at that moment, I'll be honest with you, I can remember thinking, oh, ye of little faith, that we would maybe end up with 500 students. Wouldn't that be terrific if we could do that with pre-K through 8th grade? God had bigger plans for us, obviously, but he moved us into that world. And then in 1986, the church, Mount Piran Church, because of its growth, had decided to expand to Marietta. Now, it was at the same time that the school was out of space in the school. So both the church and the school at the same time had run out of space. So there was a lot of prayers go up about that time about where we should locate and where we should become, what we should become. And the property on Allgood Road in East Cobb opened up. The church, there was a school there, a nice big church. So Mount Piran North was started. It's a branch, was originally a branch of Mount Piran's church down in Buckhead. And we moved the school there. And that year, in 1986, we started our high school.
Oh, wow.
And it was at that point where we started a covenantal relationship with our parents.
Yeah. So when you make a move like, I mean, it's not like a 3-minute move down the road. I mean, you're moving. Was there great support for the move? This is the best thing to do. Or was there a little like, we're right here local and it's going to be really hard for us to get there and keep going? Or it was like, awesome, new place, new location, new space. How was do you remember the move then?
I do. I remember meeting with the parents. At that point, we had about 200, 300 parents, potentially.
Enough to get upset if they wanted to.
Because they're in Buckhead.
Yeah.
And we're moving to East Cobb.
Yeah.
And Atlanta traffic wasn't as bad in 86 as it is now, but it still wasn't desirable. So we did lose families. And we had to make that decision that this is in the long-term best interest. Now, a lot of those families followed us to East Cobb, obviously.
Yeah.
But that was a big move for many people. And I think it was the right move. And overall, there's general support from the church and the school and most of our families to move to that new facility, quote, new facility in East Cobb. And we renovated it. And we thought we'd be there forever.
Yeah.
Nice
space, big enough, allowed room for growth. You're thinking, all right, God, this is great. You've got us here at this place. And again, I want to make note again, the change from when you talk about a covenantal school, and again, we might have people who listen and go, well, I'm not
sure.
When we talk about open enrollment or missional or even evangelical, it means that you don't have to necessarily have a faith background or church, active, regular church attendance to be a part of the school. But covenantal, a little different, says, we expect a partnership with you and the church. You're active in your church. Your kids, if they're old enough, are of faith. You are of faith. It was, you guys made that decision then in 86.
We did.
Can you
flesh that out a little bit?
Why the change?
Notice the parallel here. At the same time this was happening, we were starting our high school. So initially, we thought we were an evangelistic school, and that was perfectly fine during those early years. But we were discovering that we were not speaking the same language as our parents. And so when we were in discipline issues or conversations about projects and goals and so on, there were some of our families who just didn't get it. Didn't understand the biblical frame from which we came. When we went to high school, we realized that these students need to come to us with common language, and the families need to come with a common language. So what we then required was that both parents profess faith in Christ. Now, we didn't ask that students do that. They're young, 13-year-old, but we wanted the family to embrace the language, not only the language, but the concepts of biblical truth that we promoted. The mission of the school was always unapologetically Christian in an academic excellence. That was it. So we felt like we were firming up our mission by providing that covenantal relationship in 1986 going forward. I was there 4 years during that time, and the high school graduated as first students back in 87, 88.
So, so that's when the first graduates.
That's right.
So you've now expanded. So by 88, Mount Paran has its first graduating
That's
class.
right.
Of how many? How many were in the first graduating class?
Probably 20, 25.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But it was a special moment. I do remember that. We all and those at Mount Paran will relate to this. Those that don't know that we do this, but that's when we started the prayer at the end of the commencement. It's a special time when for those 20-some kids, very first commencement, I remember it well. We had staff members pray over our students, which we still do with over 100 graduates.
It's one of the most amazing things to be a part of if you've not seen that or been able to be a part of it. I had no idea it was that went
very
back
first
that far.
graduation. Very first graduation.
Yeah, what a cool tradition to keep.
The mission has stayed intact. The ministry stayed intact. The unapologetic nature has stayed intact. The verbiage of the mission has changed a little bit, but the missional sense has always been the same.
Okay, so the schools continue to grow. If we're recording this episode from a podcast studio, not at All Good Road,
right?
And so at some point, nor as a ministry of Mount Paran Church of God any longer. So where in this journey do we see the move from All Good Road to I think where we currently are today is where we move from, correct?
That's right.
And then there is a separation because I still get the question today. People are like, well, you're still a ministry of the church, right? Or how do I? And I actually tell them, no, we're not any longer. We were. So give us a little insight at what point that we made the change in both of those areas.
Thank you. The name Mount Paran is confusing to people somewhat because the connection with Mount Paran is Mount Paran Road or Mount Paran Church. Mount Paran Church sits on Mount Paran Road.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing up here that's Mount Paran except the school. So people do have a legitimate question about, why are you Mount Paran? Are you still connected to the church? Back in 2001, when the school moved here, prior to that, about 2 or 3 years before that, both the church and the school at Mount Paran North, were realizing we're crowded. We don't have space for the kind of expansion that we both need to do. There's a lot of growth in the school at that point. And so the church and the school split amiably. And we began, Ron Mulkey, give him a lot of credit on this. He was the board chairman at the time, began to look at property throughout the area. And the whole story of us landing on this property was a God thing. Because for years, this is if you know this area, you understand where we are in Cobb County, this is probably the best piece of real estate in all of Cobb. Clearly in West Cobb.
Yeah.
And it was a farm back in those days. And Ron Mulkey did his due diligence and always every year went to them and said, would you be willing to sell? And they would always said no.
Yeah.
Well, as the Lord would have it, as he moves mountains for us all the time, when the family died, the Murray family, Mrs. Murray died, Julie Murray, she indicated that she would like to sell this to a Christian organization, this property with a lake and beautiful area, and referenced the fact that Ron Mulkey had visited several times to try to get this property. So here we are. Real estate agents would love to have had it, never went up for sale. In fact, Mount Paran Christian School was able to purchase it in 2001. And we've been here now, 23 years on this beautiful property with the Kennesaw Mountain, which reminds us of the fact that God has moved many mountains.
For sure.
At Mount Paran. The name itself implies and reminds us of the faithfulness of God to move mountains at this school. So from that point, from about 600 students to more than double that, to 1,300 students, we now have a program that is still fully committed to the unapologetic, affirming Word of God, teaching students pre-K through 12.
Yeah. When you think about that land and the fact that it never was officially listed or on the market,
right.
Had it been, like you said, this is a prime piece, even selling to a Christian, somebody could have stepped in and offered twice what
clearly.
Could have gone a completely different direction had it not been certainly for the faithfulness of God and the pursuit of people like Ron Mulkey and those who were passionate pursuers of this kind of thing, and God moving mountains to prepare this land, this place, 8 acres out here of beautiful property
absolutely.
with some of the most scenic backgrounds in the area, for sure.
Doabsolutely. And there's there are many examples of God's move, how he moved mountains. One of them is the building in which we sit, the Murray Arts Center. Mr. Dozier, who was generous to the school, built this wonderful building for us. more than we could ever dream or imagine, and we were able to purchase it at a steal of a deal, for the school. In addition to that, we have the Sewell Stadium. And in addition to the MIC. Now, the Sewell Stadium is an interesting story because Mrs. Sewell, Kathy Steele Sewell, was a parent in the very first class back at Mount Perrin Christian Learning Center.
Oh, wow.
Her daughter was a student in the very first class. So when Kathy Sewell, and I approached Kathy and Charles Sewell, wonderful servants of God, when I approached them, they are constantly giving back to the place that gave Kathy Sewell and her daughter, a place to learn. Who knows? That's a mountain that we cannot even, there's so many mountains we cannot even describe, but the gift of the Doziers, the many donors who have come through to support us, we're standing on the shoulders of many people who gave much of their treasure, their time, their resources to build us and put us where we are right now.
Yeah.
That's just two wonderful examples of how God has moved mountains in this place, but he also moves it in the lives of kids. We have so many alumni out there doing good work for God in ministry and in professions. I'm totally amazed and am blessed to have been a part of this for now almost 50 years. We will celebrate our 50th anniversary in 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting for me to think about.
Very exciting, and which kind of as we get ready to kind of land where we are now, and I again, and hearing the stories, and I've met so many of these people you've mentioned.
Right.
I've met them or their family members who have given and faithfully, desiring not to be recognized or named, but for God to continue to work. That's the significant thing, is these people weren't doing it for any kind of glory or, oh, well, I get my name on something. We want to see God continue to work and do amazing things and most importantly, move mountains in the lives of our students, our alum, many of which we've had 3 alum now on this podcast talking about what God's doing in their lives and how God's using them because of people like that. So,
that's right.
So here we sit when we're doing this episode. Of course, we're at your 3rd stint here.
That's right.
Officially 3rd stint here, head of school. I think you left. That's when you did college, right? For a little bit after your first one.
After my first stint here, I did college.
Yeah, came back again, and I think that's when I joined you on staff for the 1 year prior to your you retired.
I retired.
And I'm putting air quotes. If you're listening to this, we joke. I don't know if you'll ever officially retire, but you didn't really retire. You kind of went around and did a ton of other stuff.
Well, I appreciate that, and I am going to officially retire. I think God is telling me at my age right now.
And Angie is too.
And Angie is too, telling me the same thing. But let me just say this, Steve, I think this is crucial. Mount Perrin still has not arrived. Yeah. It is in progress still. The future of this place with the leadership, with Dr. Curlin and all the people that will be joining this team, from spiritual life to academics to athletics and arts, the future, I cannot wait to see what God will do with this place. There are more mountains to be moved. Yeah. And so we have not arrived. We are not there yet, but I am encouraged by the new leadership that the school will have, and there will never be a greater supporter than I will be as we move on into the future of the school. Well,
there's no doubt about that. And I will say, and this isn't why we're doing this episode, I'll say on behalf of anybody who listens and needs to be a part of it, and I would say this, having been here now 7 years, to be a part of what God is doing. I've done Christian education for 30 years, and these last 7 years have just been transformative, seeing what God's done, and it's been maybe the best 7 years of doing what I get to do here. But I will say on behalf, to say thank you, because you can look at that and say, certainly God has done it all. But God uses faithful men and women. We know that through giving and through all that. And so Dave, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for what you've done to help move mountains here. God uses people who are obedient, who are faithful, who are committed, and you have been I've seen that with my own eyes. You've been all that for this community.
It's very kind of you to say that. It is a blessing. It is a joy, even in the tough times of of Mount Perrin. God has been present. He's always been faithful.
Amen.
And he always will be.
He will.
He's
And
moved many mountains
yeah,
for
and
us.
I'm here. I can be maybe I'll be a guest on this podcast in 20 years and talk about all that God continued to do here. But
Well, I hope I can be a guest in 20 years.
Yeah. It'd be a way different conversation, I think, then. But Dave, thank you again for being
Thanks,
on
Steve.
this episode. And thank you guys for listening to another episode of From the Mount.